Welcome to the Better Together podcast, where we look for ways we can work together to advance the gospel of Jesus Christ. Today we have with us promotional director Reuben Cason from the state of North Carolina. I'm going to tell you right now, he doesn't pull for the NC State Wolfpack, but don't hold that against him. He's still a halfway decent person. So we appreciate you, Brother Reuben. Hey, longtime pastor before he was in this present position. And why we're going to talk to you today, Brother Reuben, is because you are speaking to us, preaching to us on Tuesday evening. So thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Moody. It's an honor to be with you.
Well, somebody put something nasty on my Facebook site. It was when a wonderful team by the name of NC State was about to play in the Final Four. And they said something about they liked the coffee, they liked the cookie, but they did not like the shirt or something like that. But we're supposed to forgive, aren't we?
Yes, sir. But go Heels.
Well, we got baseball and football coming, but you know what? While we're talking about North Carolina, I have to praise you. What a good job you and the state of North Carolina did at the National last year. So, first of all, do you know how many attendees came to your state, my friend?
Don't know the exact number, but it was over 5,000, if I remember correctly.
It was the highest attendance since 2012. And so we're picking up 800 to 1,000 people a year or whatever. And so what a good job. How in the world did you get so many people to come out to the National there in Raleigh, North Carolina?
Well, first of all, we thank the Lord for the opportunity to host the convention. We had a wonderful steering committee. Our executive board did a great job in helping us promote it across the state. Our prayer chairman, Brother Luke Johnson, did a wonderful job leading us in praying for the meeting. And we had guys that were just involved in their local associations, helping us get the word out. And then as we traveled to the association meetings, the year leading up to the convention, we were inviting folks to come. And we have a lot of people within an hour, 2 hour drive at the convention. And some of them share with me that they hadn't been to a convention in a very long time, since the last time it was in North Carolina, I believe back in Charlotte. That we thank the Lord for our Women Active for Christ here in the state, youth competition. All of these ministries just came together to help us pray and plan for and promote the convention.
Well, you named a lot of different people, a lot of different groups, and that tells you it takes a lot, doesn't it?
Yes, sir, it
get
does.
Something off the ground like that, and it looks like it did a lot for you. I noticed a lot of your states picked up doing the Hope Initiative, doing Know Your Community, and so the workshops and the services and all that. It seemed like it was a good benefit for your state too.
Absolutely.
Fact. Well, that was last year. This year we're going to Tampa, and on Tuesday evening there's a fellow by the name of Reuben Cason that's going to be preaching for us. And so, as our listeners are trying to tune in and they're starting to get ready for the National in a couple of weeks, what can they expect to happen on Tuesday evening?
Well, number one, I'm grateful for the privilege and the opportunity to preach at the National on Tuesday night. And my theme and my scripture verse has been assigned from James chapter 5, verses 7 through 12. Do the word by enduring suffering. And as I have been reading and studying and praying over this passage of scripture, it's just really opened my eyes to the theme of suffering. And if you don't mind, I'll just share a couple of thoughts already. I don't know if this is the exact outline that I'll go with, but the obvious point is that of suffering, and we see that in verse 10. I was attending a church service not long ago, and sitting in Sunday school listening. If you don't mind me just referencing another passage of scripture that really spoke volumes to my heart along the subject of suffering. 1 Thessalonians chapter number 3, that no man should be moved by these afflictions, For you yourselves know that we are appointed thereunto. For verily, when we were with you, we told you before that we should suffer tribulation, even as it came to pass, as ye know. And just that phrase, being appointed to, of course, the context of that passage of scripture dealing with suffering persecution. And this, I wrote this down. No one wants to suffer. I don't know of a single believer who desires to suffer. No one wants to suffer. But at the same time, we know we do suffer. And every believer suffers, some more than others. But every believer suffers. So if it is the inevitable, what do we do? How do we respond to suffering? And the two other things there in this passage of scripture from James, he says, be patient, therefore, brethren, unto the coming of the Lord. He gives illustration of the farmer as he plants and he waits and he endures storms. Sometimes the crops suffer through the storm. And sometimes the yield of that harvest is not as abundant because of the storm. But we can trust in the Lord. And so we think about the soon coming of the Lord that gives us encouragement to endure. And then the third thing I see in this passage of scripture, I did not realize, and I preached through James before, but I did not realize how many times the word patient is used within these short amount of verses, in verse 7, verse 8, verse 10, and verse 11. And so we're to stay with it. We're to stick with it in this aspect of endurance. And Dr. Moody, as you well know, and you've pastored for a number of years, I wish that I could say that everyone who suffers and is encouraged through that suffering comes out on the other end in victory, but it doesn't always end in the victory that we think it should. But we can stay with it because the outcome is not up to us. That's up to the Lord. Of course, so ultimately we know we win in the end. And that, boy, what an encouragement that is when we're going through suffering. And so those are some of the thoughts that the Lord has already began to work in my heart that I trust will be an encouragement with everything we're going through in this world. We need this. We need this message of encouragement to endure the suffering. And so I appreciate the opportunity to revisit this passage of scripture.
Well, we appreciate you putting so much time and effort into it and preparing. And we know that you mentioned Luke earlier as the prayer leader last year, and he'll introduce you on Tuesday evening. And so you
Yes,
all
sir.
are not strangers to suffering. And
no, sir.
We thank you for that. And our listeners, I suspect most of them are aware of Landon and his battle and how God's
Yes,
helped
sir.
you all through that. But that's really what our group was thinking, why we wanted you to tackle this passage. And I'm looking forward to it, buddy. I'm excited about it. And I think it's going to be good for our people, as you alluded to. There's so much struggle and so much pain in the world right now. It's a great passage to look at.
Yes, sir. Well, if I could add to that about Landon, there's nothing that really prepares you to go through that storm. I've relived those moments, especially that last week of his life, many times, and it's still very painful. And I think we do a good job of suppressing feelings, but I think it's good for us to revisit those feelings and those moments because, number one, there was so many people praying for us during that time, and the week that the National Med in Cincinnati was a very critical week for us, and there the National Convention was meeting in the same town that Landon was in, Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and we could just feel the prayers of God's people and what an encouragement that was. And since then, we've been wanting to do that for others because we know how helpful it was to our family, to Luke and Amanda in particular, and to see them, what they went through and how they applied these verses of scripture, that when we're suffering, to have that patient endurance was really encouraging. So we thank the Lord for Landon, and his story is still touching a lot of people, and we're able to minister to people and encourage people. And so then I went through a personal bout with cancer back in 2014 and 2015. Started this position in 2016 in June. In February. And then in June of that year, my daddy passed away with pancreatic cancer. And I had a nephew that died in 2017. So it's like 16, 17, 19. There were just some rough waters to go through. But as we look back, we know that God's grace and God's mercy gave us the strength to endure that suffering. But in enduring that suffering and receiving the encouragement we did, gives us help and gives us what we need today to be a blessing to others. Because even though the storms might have subsided in our lives, it was just beginning in some other people's lives. And so we really do want to encourage one another to be patient, and the coming of the Lord is drawing nigh.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's
Amen.
good. Well, I think our listeners will know why we wanted you to do this message. They think
I
that
appreciate
a
it.
little bit, and you kind of alluded to it. We're all going at some point. We're
Yes,
going
sir.
we're going to see this. So it's a great passage for us to look at, and we've got a great preacher to bring it to us on Tuesday evening. We're just looking forward to it, and I appreciate you so much. The good work you do there in North Carolina, and the good work you do on our executive committee. We should point that out.
Thank you.
Well,
yes,
and I think everybody's going to benefit Tuesday evening there at the National. So join us in Tampa. Well, thank you, my friend. I appreciate you coming and sharing with us today, and I appreciate the good work that you're doing. It really means a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Moody. I appreciate that, and we appreciate you and all you do in the executive office there. And we're just so grateful for our denomination.
And thank you, sir. Hey, we appreciate you, our listener. We want to encourage you to think about things you can do, your role. So you heard about Pastor Luke Johnson, the good job he did last year on the prayer committee. And I really do think that made a difference in what happened in Raleigh. This year, Pastor Bob Brown has set up a calendar, he and his team. We want to encourage you to go to the NAFWB Facebook site or NAFWB.org and look at convention and pray each day, 50 days of prayer to pray for our convention. We want to also encourage you to give toward the convention. It's always more expensive than we would have expected. So the expenses this year are actually far more than we would expect, and that we're often able to support. So we're asking all of our folks to, if they would, to give $25 toward the convention. You can go online to nafwb.org, click on giving, and give $25 toward the convention, whether you're coming in person or watching online, or you just want to help out. And you don't have to stop at $25. You can go a little bit beyond that, or a lot beyond that if you would like. But remember, every little thing you do, every little thing you give, it really does help. It really does make a difference when we all come together. We are better together. Thank you.